Gemini by Trevor Wilson. This book is dedicated to the family that showed me my path, the friends who gave me course correction, and the many, many authors and writers who inspired me. Forward. Space. The somewhat explored frontier. There have been countless books, radio dramas, movies, and TV shows detailing the adventures of people living in this mysterious vastness. Most of them focus on a group of adventurers as they try to save something. A few focus on a family or crew's day-to-day shenanigans. Some make you laugh, and some make you gasp in surprise. But there are none, at least none that I can think of, that focus on the same aspects of futuristic interstellar life that Gemini does. Now, I wrote Gemini for two reasons. First, I wrote it to prove to myself that I could, and to see that I could create as well as recite, to make a story instead of just helping to tell one. The other reason I wrote it is because I've read so many different fantasy or sci-fi novels, and I've found that the more mundane activities of a fantastic or futuristic world can often be just as exciting as the great adventures. This is the story of one of those mundane activities, as a young man faces the dangers of job assignment. This is the story that just might start the path of a new author, and definitely starts the path of its protagonist. This is Gemini. Grant Hospice was late, and he knew it. A quick look at his wrist hollow's time display showed that the Gemini Occupation Registration Station had been open for an hour. He looked back out at the unmoving traffic of starships before him. I don't have time for this. He quickly looked around. There wasn't a police ship patrolling anywhere in the vicinity. Well then, I better get going. He quickly ducked his ship below the traffic and shot off towards his destination. Who in their right mind thought that putting roads in space was a good idea anyway? Grant's destination was the Castor Space Station, the capital of the Gemini system. Specifically, he was heading to its services section, where a large crowd of people was lining up in the tiled waiting queue. Over the centuries, a lot had changed, but the general layout for public government departments was not one of them.
Attention all graduates of the class of 2017, this is a friendly reminder that today is the last day for you to submit your initial occupation registration form. Anyone who fails to submit this form by the end of the day will be culled. Thank you and have a great day at the Gemini Occupation Registration Station. The announcement came to a close, just in time for Grant to race through the doors of the station.
Whoa, buddy! You don't want to run over everyone in line, do you?
Grant stopped to see that, in his haste, he had nearly charged right through the line of fellow graduates and applicants. How did I miss this?
Wait, Grant? What are you doing here? I would have sworn you'd already turned in your form days ago.
Grant turned to see Sora Fitzsimmons, his former roommate at Beetlejuice Multiversity, and also his best friend. Oh, hey Sora, how've you been?
It's been good. I just got my form and all. I'm gonna manage a department store.
Way to keep a high standard. I still haven't gotten mine.
Yeah, I couldn't tell by the way you crashed in here like a freaking meteor.
Sora looked over to the line ahead.
You've got a long way to go. I hope you brought something to do.
I might have an idea.
Ah, that again. Hey, what are you going into? You said at the end of the year that you finally had some things in mind, but you never really told me what they were. You've got, what, a combat studies major? There's only so much you can do with one of those.
I also have a minor in economics. My mom wants me to work as her co-counsel, but...
Your mom? Isn't she a supreme level lawyer? Why wouldn't you do that? Think of the cash!
But I'd rather be a merc, kinda like my dad was. I've thought this through. Hey, Carrot Head! Both Sora and Grant turned to see another guy around their age, only a lot bigger. Would you tell Crewcut over there to get a move on? He's holding up the line!
Good one, Greg.
They looked over to the line. He was right. While they had been talking, the line had moved, leaving a clear divide between Grant and the person in front of him. Grant moved to close the gap, leaving Sora to apologize. He took out his wrist hollow once he'd caught up, and activated the facial recognition feature he'd installed. As he scanned the guy who yelled at him, as well as pretty much every other face in the room, he took a sip of the cappuccino that had made him late in the first place, his olive eyes lighting up with energy as he drank. The cup soon emptied, and Grant returned to his wrist hollow. The facial recog had finished, so he set up the widget he'd bought to search for any info he could use, and save it for later. Once that was done, he went back to thinking about his potential career. His dad had been a mercenary, but he had left his mom years ago. Not long afterwards, his mom began trying to mold Grant into working in law like her, like as a paralegal or something. Grant guessed she didn't want to see another member of her family leave. It made sense, too. His dad's job put a lot of strain on his marriage. The Bible explicitly said not to kill others, and the 2700 governmentally revised version only made that clearer. But he kept on taking assassination missions, since they paid the most. Maybe that's why his mom started actively climbing the ranks in her law firm. No matter the reason, the divorce left 12-year-old Grant with a definitive thought. If he was to become a mercenary, he wouldn't be like his dad.
Seriously? You're still in line?
A loud comment jolted Grant out of his introspection. He turned to see Sora standing right outside the line barriers.
Seriously? You're still in line? Come on, Grant. I've already finished mine. At this rate, I'll probably be shipped off to Denham Kados by the time you're finished.
I blame the cappuccino. If it wasn't for this thing, I'd have been on time.
Grant, how many years have I been your roommate?
2? Grant wasn't quite sure where this conversation was going.
And in those 2 years, don't you think I'd realize that you never get up early? Come on, man, I'm optimistic, not naive.
Fine. I slept in a bit too late. But I still think the coffee's what did me in. Anyway, the line's moving a little faster. At this rate, I might even avoid the culling.
Dude, don't even joke about that kind of stuff. I've seen what happens at a culling. It's freaking brutal. I don't want to have that happen to anyone I know, least of all my best friend.
Before Sora could go on, his wrist hollow spouted out an upbeat pop riff. He tapped his earpiece and began talking. Grant noticed that the call came from Sora's dad. He soon hung up and explained that his family needed him to help prepare dinner in celebration of his new job. He dropped his form in the nearby submission slot, wished Grant luck, and headed out the door, leaving Grant alone on the rest of this quest. Well, at least it's a shorter line now. That's a blessing, I guess. He checked on the progress of his wrist hollow's data collection widget. It had finished its listings a while ago, and while the information could be promising later, there weren't any immediate threats in the station. At long last, he made it to the desk. A young woman in blue handed him the required occupation registration forms and pointed out where the pens were. Grant grabbed a yellow pen and a clipboard and found a chair to sit in. After all this waiting, this wouldn't take too long, right? Wrong. While the first page was simple enough, name, date of birth, blood type, etc., the next pages seemed to follow more of a complex personality test and background check. Grant could barely remember what his first grade teacher's name was, let alone what his grades were in that class. He flipped through the pages, which covered pretty much any topic one could think of, from his preferred choice in headphones to his least favorite historical serial killer. At the very back of the form, there was what looked like an advertisement. "Don't like forms?" it read. "Ask a desk clerk about our mental scan option." You have got to be kidding me. Why wouldn't they put this on, I don't know, a sign by the clerks? With an exasperated sigh, Grant got up and re-entered the ever-lengthening line of applicants. As he waited, he booted up his wrist hollow and began playing the latest version of Apoplectic Avians. He had just demolished another pig castle when a saxophone solo announced he had an incoming call. He tapped his earpiece. Grant Hospice.
I'm well aware to whom I'm speaking.
Hey, Mom. What do you need? Melanie Hospice wasn't one to waste time without reason, so a phone call to her son usually meant she wanted something.
I was just calling to see how your day is. After all, I need to make sure any paralegals under me are in top form.
Oh dear. This was not going to end well. About that. Two things. One, I'm still in line.
Well, hurry up then. I've got a list of assignments waiting for you at the firm.
Wasn't finished, Mom. Two, I don't really want to be a paralegal. I have some plans I want to put into action, and I really think I can make it out there on my own.
As what? A lawyer? Grant, you're a combat studies major. You're lucky I was able to even get you as a paralegal. What well-paying job would you even be able to get with that flimsy excuse for a subject of study?
Well, I want to be a merc.
I'm sorry. What was that?
I want to be a mercenary. Like Dad was. Only, not at all like Dad, because I won't take any...
No. I raised you better than that. You are not going down that path. You are going to get that form, and the moment you hand it back, with paralegal written as your career, you will head to my offices and work here until the day I die. After that, you may do as you please, but I think you'd be a little old to be a mercenary then.
Grant was shocked, to say the least. He had expected a bad reaction to his planned career, but this was something else. Mom, I won't wind up like Dad. I've already made a commitment not to take any jobs that go against what I know is right, even if it costs me my paycheck. So, don't think of it as me being a mercenary, and, more like I'm doing, odd jobs.
I didn't want to tell you this, but it looks like I have no choice. Your father died in his mercenary work, and I don't want the same to happen to you. So just fill out your form as a paralegal, and I'll let you run your silly little odd jobs business from my firm if I have to.
I'll see what I can do. I'll be doing the mental scan version of the form, so I'll try and think in that direction if I can.
That's all I ask.
And with the conversation came to a close. Grant spent the next few minutes thinking about the conversation. His father was dead? Well, that would explain why he hadn't received a birthday card from him since he was 18, but how would she know? She had severed ties with him over 9 years ago. For that matter, would agreeing to be a paralegal really let him do what he wanted? Even if his mom assured him it would, he wasn't entirely sold. Eventually, though, Grant decided that if he really believed in his mom by the time of the test, the results would assign him a paralegal job. If not, well, that would be that. He reopened his game of apoplectic avians to let his family issues fade into his subconscious, but the question just wouldn't leave. He soon tired of the cheery game of bird-themed destruction, and his thoughts returned to his problems. Some were fairly straightforward. Why hadn't he questioned his father's absence for the last 4 years? Well, he had been receiving encouragement to stay away from the topic of his father since the divorce. How did the person who found the body know it was Philip Hospice? All they need is a piece of him to determine his identity. Everyone's put in the Grand Registrar at birth. It's the law. Did the government know? Of course they did. They're the government. They know everything. Other questions, though, were not so easily answered. Was his father even dead? Why had his mother held this information until now? Why was the film industry centered in Alpha Sculptoris? The last question admittedly didn't make much sense in context with the rest, but it had bugged Grant for as long as he could remember. With not much else to do, Grant checked his wrist hollow. He had spent well over an hour at the course, and a quick search revealed he only had an hour or so before closing. Grant turned around, expecting something akin to the crowd that pushed him forward on his previous run through the line. Surprisingly, there were only a few stragglers behind him, all looking at their wrist hollows anxiously. For the briefest of moments, Grant wondered why, before the reality of his situation smacked him across the face like a dead herring. In an hour, anyone not registered would be taken to the culling. Grant looked over to the front of the line to see that a gap had formed. He hastily filled it. A brief, jazzy accordion tune announced a text from Sora. asking if he was still at the gorse. He said he saw a harvester headed to Castor. Grant hastily typed up a response and sent it before he made an exit from his prison of patience. At long last, it was his turn in line. The woman at the desk was asleep.
Really? It's not even 2 in the afternoon yet. Why is everyone so tired?
He rang the small bell on the receptionist's desk.
Excuse me? I'd like some help, please.
If he was going to get this done fast, he needed to be polite. No one works fast for a rude patron. The receptionist blinked a few times before the situation dawned on her.
Oh my gosh, I am so sorry about that.
As she scrambled to restore order to both her slept-upon desk and her fluffy black hair, Grant took note of the name tag she wore, which read Daisy in a curvy, even font.
Okay, what can I help you with?
I was hoping to take the mental scan version of the occupation registration form.
Oh sure, you'll just need to answer a few questions. You know, mental issues, signing the waiver, the usual.
Grant understood most of what she said, but one part concerned him.
What's the waiver for? Aren't these mental scans painless?
Well, yeah, they are, but you will have a government-controlled artificial intelligence rooting around your brain. If we come across anything important, pre-authorization to confiscate makes things simpler. Anything else?
Well, Grant couldn't argue with logic like that, especially not with harvesters on the way.
I'm good. So, where do we begin?
Daisy led him to a different part of the government section of Castor, leaving the sterile design of the Occupation Registration Station behind for a smaller, dimly lit room, with only a table and 2 chairs there to garnish it.
Okay. Have you ever been diagnosed with a mental or developmental disorder?
Grant recalled his first, and last, trip to a psychiatrist, back when he was 13.
Mrs. Hospice, there's nothing to worry about. We've done our tests and your son is fine. He's just a teenager. They can be rebellious from time to time.
His mom's still worried for another week after the psychiatrist visit.
Not unless you count being a teenager.
Alrighty then. Have you participated in any activities that would result in use of a temporary or permanent AI graft?
Isn't that illegal?
Not in Cygnus it isn't. That's why we have to ask.
In that case, no.
Great! Watch any reality TV?
Nah, it's not my kind of thing. Why?
It rots the brain. Why else?
In hindsight, Grant realized the answer should have been obvious.
Then, why show it at all?
I don't know. Probably for the same reason you get plasma cutter finger guillotines or isotopic manchego flavored Cheez-Its. People are dumb.
Oh. What's the next question?
That's it, actually. Now, I just gotta go get the waiver and we can start up your test.
Oh. Okay. Thanks, by the way.
My pleasure.
As Daisy left to go get the final paper that would end all this waiting about, Grant once again drifted off in thought. Why did the line at Comet Coffee have to be so long? Were the baristas being intentionally slow, or did everyone else just order a lot? Why hadn't Gorse actively advertised the mental scan option? Were there any flavors of Cheez-It that weren't radioactive anymore? After a moment of thought on the last one, Grant decided to reconsider his shopping list, if he actually survived this mess. The door slid open, and Daisy walked back into the dark room, the waiver attached to the clipboard she held.
Well, here you go. I'll go get Duan set up. You finish up here.
Wait! What the heck is Duan?
Unfortunately, Daisy had already entered another nearby room and was well out of earshot. The waiver still sat on the table, beckoning to Grant.
Well, Duan will have to wait, whatever it is.
He picked up the waiver, gave it a quick once-over, and signed it before following Daisy's path. Unlike the last room, this one shone. Chrome covered every surface and dark lines went every which way, but all the lines ran to a sphere embedded into the ceiling, directly above a surprisingly comfortable-looking chair.
Well, What do you think?
It's... what is all this?
This is Duan. They're the AI, the head honchos back in Scutum sent to help out here in Gemini. We mostly have them scan people like you who sign the waiver, but sometimes the guys in blue want them to help with an investigation or something. They're pretty chill.
With the flick of a switch, yellow light flowed through the lines up to the sphere, which began to whir with life. Wait, they? You have 2 AI here?
No, silly. Just one.
She looked up at the sphere, which had swiveled about to reveal a golden eye-like light.
Hey, Duan, say hey to our guest.
Hey, are you here to complete an occupation registration form?
Yeah, actually.
Well, it seems Duan's got the rest of this handled.
Grant turned at that to see Daisy about to close the door as she left.
I'll let you two get down to business.
But Daisy, there are no Huns anywhere, and there have not been for a millennia.
Daisy chuckled, then shut the door. I don't get it.
It matters not. The joke was not intended for you to get, and is, for that matter, over 700 years old. The joke was intended for Daisy, as she has been studying classical stories and myths for some time now. In any case, we should begin the test. Are you ready, subject?
My name is Grant Hospice, and yes, I am. A controlled spark of electricity burst from the wall and entered Grant's spinal cord. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. When Grant came to, his surroundings had changed drastically. The chrome walls and ceilings were replaced by an open, navy nothingness. The floor was a simple blue light.
I see you are conscious.
Duan's voice snapped Grant out of his observational reverie. He looked around for the artificial intelligence, to no avail. Duan, where are you? For that matter, where am I?
So many questions, Mr. Hospice. Luckily for you, this won't take any time at all.
A patch of the ground darkened. From it rose a figure, entirely colored in a whitish yellow that seemed to oppose the blueness around him? Her? It? The being didn't really look male or female, and the technology grid wetsuit didn't give any help either. In any case, the person thing was made entirely out of shades of yellow.
I noticed that you were confused by my choice of pronouns earlier. Does this serve as a suitable explanation?
Not really, no. Wait, why aren't you a ball on the ceiling anymore?
Perhaps your questions will be answered in due time, Mr. Hospice. Then again, perhaps not. First, though, I would like to explain the pronoun debacle you seem to have trouble comprehending. I am an artificial intelligence. Normally, we assign ourselves the gender of male or female to ease conversation. I simply decided not to. Neither one suited my tastes. After all, why shouldn't the artificial intelligence for the Gemini satellites go beyond the binary of common gender?
That doesn't make much sense to me, but okay. Why not let people use it instead?
The pronoun it is not only dehumanizing, but also surprisingly prone to misunderstandings. There were other options available as well, but I liked they best. I found it fitting.
Isn't they just as confusing?
Perhaps, but it is significantly more humanizing. But we are getting off track. I did not render you unconscious and insert myself into your mindscape merely to discuss my gender identity. We are here to determine your occupation, Mr. Hospice.
Wait, we're in my mind?
No, Mr. Hospice, we are not. I am currently talking to you from within a slab of braised venison. That is how I was able to achieve a humanoid form for this conversation. The cooked meats fuel my computer core. Truly, it is amazing what technology can attain.
Funny. You can fluently use sarcasm, but you can't handle simple contractions.
I have no need for them. If you desire a down-to-earth AI, visit Alpha Indy. I am certain Kotala will be more than accepting. Nevertheless, we shall begin the test.
Fine. Ask away.
Very well, then.
In an instant, the humanoid form Duan had been using changed into a giant rectangle with a yellow pen strapped to the side.
What is your ideal career?
Their words formed along the rectangle's surface as they spoke.
I want to be...
Do not speak! Write!
The yellow pen floated over to Grant, and the words on Duan deleted themselves. Grant anxiously crept over to the rectangle and hastily wrote, "Mercenary," before closing his eyes and covering his ears in anticipation. No boisterous cry followed. When Grant opened his eyes, he saw that Duan had resumed the human form they had earlier.
Ah, the mercenary option. According to our records, your father took the same path. Are you, perchance, trying to follow in his footsteps?
The mindscape flared a bright red, but faded back to its navy appearance as Grant regained his composure.
I will take that as a no. The question remains nonetheless. If not for hereditary reasons, why follow the path of the gun for hire?
Grant cringed slightly at the last phrase. I don't want to be a gun for hire. There just isn't a position for something like help for hire. So I'm going with the closest thing I can find.
A pacifistic mercenary. And I thought virtual omniscience would have let me see everything. Such options are available, though. Would not a community or inter-community serviceman be a more suitable option?
Maybe. Mercenary sounds cooler, though. The pay's better, too.
So be it.
Duan began to glow brighter and brighter. When the light finally died down, they were dressed in typical psychologist garb. Glasses, a black suit, and a dress shirt with the top button unbuttoned. Only the entire outfit was tinted yellow.
Now that we have finished the occupational part of the test, I need to test your personality and see if you are cut out for the mercenary life.
They gestured behind Grant, where a yellow couch had spontaneously appeared. Grant simply looked at them, his expression going back and forth between exasperation and amusement. You're kidding me, right?
It is a required part of the AI test. We need to make sure that you handle the job so we will not have to deal with you again.
Yeah, that sounds like the government, alright. What'll the questions be about?
There are only 3 questions.
They have been
passed down from test maker to
Test maker for generations!
Grant lay back down on the couch.
Yeah. Okay then. Shoot.
I feel I ought to warn you that these questions may seem redundant in some cases, but it is your reactions to them which will determine whether you are ready.
Well, let's do this then.
Very well. What is your name?
Wow, you weren't kidding when you said these were redundant.
Your name, please.
Grant Hospice.
What is your quest?
My what?
Your quest. Your overall goal. Your purpose in this. What is it?
I guess it would be to help other people with random stuff and get paid for it.
What is the registered top speed for a space fellowship, barring additional cargo modules?
Isn't that a little specific?
The third question varies depending on your career.
That explains it. I know this, don't I? Dad mentioned the space swallows every once and again, and I saw their ships listed in the books I read in the dogfight classes back at Beetlejuice. They're a group of bounty hunters who are supposed to be in charge of eliminating rogue mercs, but these days they just go after any they can find on petty charges. I knew combat studies was a good major. Now, what was their ship speed again? 3.5... 4... Wait a minute.
Grant turned to look at Duan.
What kind of space swallow ship? There are 2 kinds, the Europa model and the Afrikaans model. The Europa goes at 3.46 light years per hour, while the Afrikaans goes at 3.85.
Well done, Mr. Hospice. It seems you will do well for the mercenary path. Your thought processes were especially impressive.
Thanks. Wait, how did you know what my thought processes were?
Mr. Hospice, we are inside your mind. It was akin to hearing an announcement on a PA system. Now, I believe it is time for you to get up. The harvesters are still coming, you know.
Grant jolted upright back in the chrome room, the thought of oncoming harvesters filling his mind with fear and his blood with adrenaline. He checked his wrist hollow. It was 4:03. The Gemini Occupation Registration Station was now closed. Great. This is just perfect. That humanity-forsaken AI couldn't have bothered to end this just a bit earlier. As he rounded a corner, he heard Daisy's voice.
No, everyone should have finished their tests by now. All the forms are right here.
What of the AI testers?
Grant gulped in fear. The harvesters had arrived.
We hardly had any. I think they're all done, but you can check with Duan. They'll know better than I will.
Grant quickly hid in a nearby room as the harvesters passed. After the metallic pounding of their feet faded into the distance, he snuck back to the entry desk.
Oh, thank goodness! I was afraid the harvesters were going to get you.
Wait, why? You work for the government. Shouldn't you like the harvesters?
No one here likes the harvesters. Heck, not even the harvesters like the harvesters. They're just cold, unfeeling government drones. But if the folks in charge had their way, we'd all be replaced by them. I'd like to keep my job for at least a few more years, wouldn't you?
I don't have a job. That's kind of why I'm here, Brent. But he could say no more. The footsteps were coming back into earshot.
Run. You can't leave this floor unless you have your form, and Duan is still processing it. Try to get back here later, and hopefully I'll have it. Now go!
Grant sprinted off, passing by room after room until he had to stop and catch his breath. As he ran, he noticed a door labeled Monitor Room. He ducked in, doubting that the harvesters would even think to look in there. Inside the room was a myriad of screens, each camera feed showing a different area of Castor's service sections. In most of them, Grant could see the metallic giants moving about. The sterile white tires on the floor matched the color of the monsters who walked atop it. These were the harvesters, the ghosts of the government. Few outside the government ever got to see them, and the few who did rarely lived to tell the tale. Some of the harvesters had faces spray-painted onto what was essentially their heads, ranging from simple, ironic smileys to visages of almost portrait-like quality. All of them, though, had two capital golden eyes on their back, marking them as collectors of the Gemini system. Grant slumped against a massive Wi-Fi generator, his mind spinning. Would he be able to make it out of these blasted offices without biting the dust? He was beginning to doubt it. If he did, what would his mom think when she found out he had become a mercenary? Knowing her, she'd either lose it like she'd done earlier today, or just sigh and let him go. He was hoping for the latter, but that reaction had been happening less and less often since his dad had passed. Still more questions persisted, some of them not as important as others, but an offhanded glance monitorwards revealed a harvester heading towards the room. Grant scrambled to his feet and rushed to hide in a closet-like area across the room. Once inside, a closer look at his surroundings revealed the area was a maintenance area for the security system. At least, that was what the sign on the wall said. Grant had given up trying to understand the layout of technology on Pollux's satellite, let alone Castor's. From what he could tell, it was a needless hodgepodge of technologies dating from as early as the mid-21st century. Most satellites only updated technology when necessary. As the old adage went, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. A rusty creak alerted Grant of the harvester's entry. He did his best to stay perfectly still. After what seemed to be an eternity and a half, the harvester finally left. Given his repeated evasions of the mechanical huntsman, he was beginning to wonder if he'd ever really get caught by them. He grinned to himself. Who knows? He might just make it out of here unscathed. Brimming with newfound confidence, Grant headed out of the maintenance area and took a look at the monitor that showed the front desk. It seemed that Duan had finally finished processing his report. Grant checked the other cameras. If the monitor showed the truth, he'd have a clean run to the main desk. Grant snuck out the door, hoping that he remembered the map in the monitor room accurately. He crept along, making sure not to make a sound. Eventually, he came close to where the main desk ought to be. Grinning with satisfaction, he rounded the corner, only to smack face first into what felt like a metal wall. Oh no. Please, God, don't let it be. He looked up. A harvester stood before Grant, the enraged portrait of ancient warmonger Vladimir Putin, only serving to make the encounter both frightening and also a little bit confusing.
Trespasser located.
The harvester grabbed Grant in its vice-like grip before he could react. Oh, you have got to be kidding me! He was so close. He could practically taste the freedom, and now he was going to be culled like a population of rabid raccoons. He tried to reason with the heartless automaton. Look, my forms are right there at the front desk. If you just let me go there, I can show you, and we can get this whole thing over with. The harvester paused for a moment.
Calculating.
Grant almost grinned in eager anticipation. Was this actually going to work?
This unit has heard that excuse 4116112 times.
Nope, it wasn't going to work.
Your request means nothing.
The harvester led Grant to a room similar to where he had initially been interviewed. Upon closer examination, Grant realized it was the exact room where he had been interviewed, and though nothing had physically changed, the room had been converted from a portal to prosperity to the gate that guards the doors of death. As Grant sat, the thoughts he had pushed away earlier returned with a vengeance, and they brought friends. Had Daisy really been on his side? Who in their right mind would have painted Vladimir Putin's face on a search and destroy robot? Had that harvester really heard people say their stuff was at the desk 411,612 times? Why did the government even make more than, say, 3 harvesters per constellation? Grant admitted to himself that most of those questions were kind of silly, but he had run out of serious questions back in the monitor room. The harvester sat opposite him, and the sight of a 7-foot-tall, deadly robot sitting in an obviously too small chair was somewhere between unsettling and amusing. The silence dragged on, minute after minute, until Daisy burst through the door with a mighty
Hold it right there.
In her hand, she held Grant's salvation.
Explain. This subject is to be detained for culling.
But I have his paperwork, and it says he can go. Due unfinished processing it about 10 minutes ago.
The robot snatched the paper from her hands at lightning speed and shone a red light over it.
Scanning. Scanning.
Would it really take this long to tell? Grant was tense.
Scanning.
He held his breath. The harvester dinged.
100% accurate.
It turned to Grant.
You are free to go. We apologize for the inconvenience.
Needless to say, Grant didn't stay long. He got his necessary forms and skedaddled to his ship, and quickly set a course for the Mepsuta satellite. Sure, Pollux was closer, but Grant still wasn't quite ready to deal with his mom. He awoke the next day with a smile on his face. The stars shone brightly outside Grant's window, and with it came a new light of freedom, but also a grim reminder. I still have to call Mom. Grant paled at the thought. His mother would not be pleased to learn that he made a suitable mercenary, even if it wouldn't lead to anyone dying. That qualifier made him more of a hero for hire than a merc, but the former wasn't a career and the latter just sounded better. I'm just distracting myself. I need to call Mom. Haltingly, he activated his wrist hollow and called his mother.
Grant, it's so good to hear from you so soon.
Her voice was happy. Grant knew this was not going to end well.
I expect to see you at my firm in Zubinalakra by Monday. That should give you more than enough time to get here.
He knew his mom would keep going on until his form results were handed to her, so he figured he ought to get it out of the way. Mom, I'm not a paralegal.
What?
I said I'm not a paralegal. The mental scan marked me as a mercenary.
Well then, the scanner must have made a mistake. No matter, I'll just file a suit against the Gemini Occupation Registration Station and...
Mom, it's what I wanted. This way, I can help people.
You can help people as a paralegal, Grant!
All of the anger Melanie Hospice held towards the mercenary life now turned on her son. How? Despite having recently woken up, Grant's emotions seemed sharper than ever.
By giving people subpoenas? By acting as your assistant in a trial? By getting you a highly specific type of coffee whenever you ask?
That's not the kind of help I want to give, Mom. I want to go on great adventures through the stars, knowing that I'm helping people along the way. I want to bring a smile to someone's face because I've done anything from, finding a lost puppy to ensuring someone's frail old grandmother or beloved fiancé makes their way through a war-torn sector of space. I want to be able to say, I'm just happy to help and not gouge them with a hefty bill. I want to be a helping hand when people need me. That's why I'm doing this, Mom. I want to help people, just not in the way you're doing it. That's all. For the second time in so many days, Melanie May Hospice let out a sigh.
Your father used to be a lot like you, Grant. It's part of why I fell in love with him, but over time, those high ideals and morals become corrupt, unless you keep them under a close watch. That's why I wanted you to work with me. The legal system is all about maintaining balance. I don't want what happened to him to happen to you.
Grant smiled to himself. Don't worry, Mom. I have people who can make sure I'm on the right track. He recalled the events of the past day. Sora apparently knows me better than I'm willing to admit, and he's my best friend, so I'll definitely have at least one person holding me to my ideals. And besides, if I need to have my rights righted or my wrongs wronged, I think I know a pretty good lawyer who could give me some counsel.
Maybe you'll get through this after all. Good luck, Grant. I love you.
Love you too, Mom. Grant pressed the end button on his wrist hollow, and the conversation clicked off. A closer look showed that he had an unread piece of mail. Upon opening it, he learned the details of his first job. He was headed for Hatsia, the main headquarters for mercenaries, and the star at the tip of Orion's sword. He followed the directions in the letter to an old-looking, rusty bar. The Binding Blade Bar and Grill. Well, this is the place. Like the outside of the bar, everything inside seemed old. Battered wooden stools lined the bar. The scarred floor creaked as he entered. All around the room were ancient-looking trophies from all sorts of adventures. Grant even saw a Space Swallow's chassis suspended from the ceiling.
Hey!
A man called out to Grant, most of his features obscured by the heavy black cloak he wore. He sat at a booth in the corner of the bar.
You Grant Hospice?
Grant walked over to the mysterious figure. Yeah? Why?
I'm your instructor for the first few weeks of your new life. Now sit down.
Once Grant had made himself comfortable, the man removed his hood, revealing a familiar face Grant never thought he'd see again. His face looked a little older, and his hair had grayed, but his identity was unmistakable. Dad?
Yeah, it's me. Don't tell your mother, okay? She'd kill me. Seriously, don't tell her.
Why not? He was still trying to accept the fact that his father was alive, and now he was expected to keep it a secret. For that matter, why aren't you dead? Mom said you died in your mercenary work.
Look, to make a long story short, I panicked after what I thought was one too many broken promises. I figured she wouldn't get on my case about it if she thought I was dead. By the time I realized how stupid that was, it was too late to fix my mistakes. The word had spread, and reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. So I've been doing my best to avoid any lawyers and the Libra system in general for the last 4 years.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. How long did it take you to realize your mistake?
About 2 months.
2 months? Do I even want to know?
Hey, duty calls, you know. There was this big quest to try and find an old document back on what's left of Earth, and...
Save it for later. Right now, I could probably use some breakfast. I haven't had anything to eat since before my registration.
In that case, then, we might want to go to an actual restaurant. The Binding Blade is a very important place for mercenaries, but that's for its bulletin board, not its menu, if it even has one.
And with that, they walked out the door.
So how was your registration anyway, Grant?
I don't think it went too bad. For a late last day registration, anyways.
Oh yeah, those rarely turn out well.
I had to deal with harvesters and an AI, not to mention Mom giving me a hard time because I don't want to be a paralegal.
Yeah, that'd suck. But hey, look on the bright side. You know what they say in the mercenary biz.
What do you say, Dad?
The hardest job you'll ever take as a merc is your registration. After that, you'll still be a merc, no matter what you have to do.
With what I dealt with, that's not exactly reassuring, Dad.
I know, but you wanted adventure, right?
Yeah. This might be more fun than I thought it'd be.
And with that, Grant's new life of adventure began.
Hey, thank you for listening to Gemini. Before we move on to the cast list, here are some of the quote-unquote accolades that you'd be able to find on the back of the book if you received one of the physical copies of it. Unfortunately, since those were very limited print and distributed in a very limited area, that's highly unlikely. Nevertheless, here are the accolade quotes.
I just read this again and I'm still laughing.
Valedictorian of the Streets, Trapmaster, Erica Wilson.
It's one of the better sci-fi books I've read.
Talking Lion, Bank Employee, Colton Burge.
I'm so proud.
Doting Mother, Skilled Baker, Amy Wilson.
A book that obliterates all in its way.
Conqueror, Emperor, Walhart. And that wraps up the accolades, so let's begin the cast list. The voice of Grant Hospice was Trevor Wilson. The voice of the narrator was also Trevor Wilson. The voice of Sora Fitzsimmons was Colton Burge. The voice of Melanie Hospice was Erica Wilson. The voice of Daisy was Megan Clark. The voice of Duan, well, technically, the voices of Duan were Drake Price and Erica Rogers. The voice of the Harvesters was Felipe Santos Soto. The voice of Phil Hospice was Jake Main. The voices of the accolades were, in order, Erica Wilson, Colton Burge, Amy Wilson, and Trevor Wilson. The cover art for this video, I suppose, it was also the cover art for the book, was done by L. Morse. You can see this among other pieces of his work at lmorse.deviantart.com. The music used throughout Gemini are all listed in the description below and credited to their appropriate sources. Please don't illegally download this video. I kinda don't want to get sued, and I'm not making any money off of this anyways, so yeah. In addition, if you'd like, you can follow me on Tumblr at genndy-oda.tumblr.com. That's GENNDY-ODA-COG.tumblr.com. There's probably going to be a link in the description to that, and also L. Morse's DeviantArt page. So, yeah. Keep an eye out for future voice acting stuff coming, probably starting this summer. And I hope you enjoyed Gemini. Thank you.